Hello, beauties, and welcome to our book club discussion. It has been a while, but we started out 2025 with the first book. We do have two for this year, but the first book we read is The Prayer Box by Lisa Wingate. It is a novel, and it is a lot of characters in here. So what we're going to do is just, first of all, just go over these characters right quick. And then we're going to come back around to the story and talk about the book, okay? So for those of you that read the book, you can jog your memory with us about all of these characters. And those of you who didn't, just follow along and you can get an idea once we start getting talking of who's who. Okay.
Oh, let's introduce ourselves too.
Oh, that would be how that would, wouldn't it? That would be. Okay, so we have with me all the way to the left, we have Ebony Leslie. Soon to be Ebony
Washington.
Oh, okay. Then we have Pastor Michelle Ferguson. Yes. Minister Christina Jenkins. And then I'm Minister Anita Davis, your host for this beautiful book club discussion.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get it going. So the main chick in the book, the main woman is
Main character.
Tandy.
Tandy.
Tandy is the one who's reading these prayers.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the person who wrote the prayers is
Iola.
Yep. And then who else do we have in this book? We have
Tandy's kids, Zoe and JT.
Yep. JT's younger. Zoe's like a teenage girl.
Yeah, she had a little attitude on her. She did. She a little spicy.
But she had good reason though. She'd been through too much. She'd been through a lot.
Back to that. Yep, she did.
We have the ex, right? Tandy's ex, Tramble, is referred to very often.
Yeah, we also have the love interest towards the beginning of the book, right? Ross.
Yes. Yep. That was who she was dating originally. Then we have Paul, my boy Paul.
Come on, Paul, who was also JT's teacher originally.
Yeah, I got lost in
And
that,
also
but
need a stylist because his outfits and clothing were. Yeah,
they were horrible,
I could see every one of them.
Yep, I
Pink
could
shirt,
too.
green, Kelly green paint. Like,
And
ooh,
then
Lord.
we have the sisterhood, Miss Sandy over at the shop.
Yes, Miss Andy.
The sisterhood. Yep, love them. And then
Let's not forget about Tandy's trifling sister.
Gina. Ooh, absolutely trifling. And we're going to get to that because that just, I think I dropped the book. It was like, oh my God. No way. No way.
I know, my heart was beating off fast. I was listening to the audiobook at that part and I was like, get her.
Get her. I was done. And then I was like, yes. Anyway. Yes, Gina. Okay, so the premise of the story. Anybody think you can do a good recap? Go ahead.
So honestly, I think what's really interesting about this is you have Tandy, who is this single mother, and you're inadvertently learning her story.
Yes.
And she's been through a lot. She's just gotten out of a relationship, a very negative relationship where her guy seemed to be some sort of abusive in some way.
Yes.
Definitely.
Who he's actually being prosecuted, if I'm correct, right?
Yes, she said that paper here.
Right. So she ends up moving and trying to get away and hide out from her ex. She ends up finding herself renting this very small cottage from an older woman who was really quite mysterious, was named Iola. Beautiful older woman. And I believe even in the first month, or maybe in the first couple of weeks, Tandy goes in the house and finds Iola passed away.
Right.
In the process of that, and of course, this house is very big, expensive property owned by this family that had money, the Benoit family. And so basically, Iola had left the house to the church, but she had a ton of stuff everywhere, kind of like what you would typically expect. So what happens is, as Tandy's living through her own life, they offer to pay her and allow her to stay, because if she had to leave, if the church took over even her property, her and her kids would be evicted, homeless, and possibly have to move again. And her children were affected by all of those moves, and so all the complications with that. And so they tasked her to go through and clean up the house. In the process of it, she finds boxes where Iola had actually taken prayers that she had to God and written them down through every challenge of her life. And in those boxes, in those prayers, Tandy learns about the history of Iola, but learns about her own life and learns about a connection that she has with. I mean, it's just great the way it kind of watching Iola be faithful to God, and Iola was misunderstood. People actually thought she stole the property she was living in, all kind of stuff. And this lady was a giver and had saved things in a town people didn't know about. So it's really beautiful from that standpoint, because it was a woman who was coming from such a negative place, Tandy, and her life being all over the place, to an older woman who left a legacy.
Yeah.
She didn't even really get to impact Tandy as while she was alive, but she had such a life-changing effect on her, even in her death.
Yep. She died at 91 years old. Yep, and had a beautiful life. Now, I want to talk about, what's her name? Oh, yes. Yeah. I need to keep that in my mind. Tandy and these men that she would get with. So she was originally with Trammell. That was the guy that she was with originally, left him. She sent some information to a reporter or something like that, and that's how he wound up getting prosecuted. So then she ends up with Ross. Now, I need to find this because Ross, at the beginning, you thought, oh, you know, she made him, it seemed like, again, he was so good. He was good for the.
You remember Ross a little bit.
Then with Ross, and then I got to know Ross, and I was like, Ross is just Trammell. That's all that is, because hold on, y'all talk. I'm about to find this right quick.
No, because I think that's really indicative. And nobody really starts a relationship thinking, Lord, let me screw up my life. Sure. But you tend to attract the same people that would treat you how you feel about yourself. And you see that repeatedly happening in Tandy's life. Trammell's, her ex had money, and so those needs were met. But also that relationship ended in such a way where she had to hide out.
Right.
Yeah. And then she went from living that lifestyle to being completely broke and destitute and trying to figure out how to feed her family, because they were eating out of Iola's kitchen. Leftovers after she had passed.
Yeah.
And Trammell, like, just to go back for a moment, you know, about this lady's name, Tandy. I'm reminding her about Tandy. Trammell was actually, you know, the way that she kind of met Trammell was she had an accident. She used to ride horses.
Yeah.
She had an accident. She got injured. And he was, you know, trying to actually keep her on this medication. She became addicted to medication. And so it was definitely abuse. You know, he was telling her, you never, you know, if you ever leave, I'm going to find you, you know, and he was doing illegal things in his practice, like, you know, using underprivileged kids who had access to Medicaid dollars, you know, as cash cows, and doing things, putting, you know, appliances and things in their mouth that they didn't actually need, filing down perfectly good teeth and stuff like that. So, I mean, this guy was, not only was he, you know, awful, he was a monster technically. And that's what she ended up turning him in for, is what he was doing to those kids, just because no one was watching over them as closely or didn't know the difference. But yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it was very quick for me with Ross. I was suspect of Ross almost right away, because I was thinking, you went from Trammell, you're running, you're kind of destitute. You don't really have much money. You're worried about where you're going to live. And I'm thinking, what kind of, who's making a great decision in those circumstances? There are some folks, but I'm thinking, what is this guy? What do we know about him?
And he was clearly, his attitude towards her children is what instantly took me out, because, you know, I get it when you have a child and you're moving into a relationship, or you don't have a child and you're going into a relationship with someone who has a child. If you are choosing to be in a relationship with a parent, and you have a problem with them parenting, you're trifling. I'm sorry. That's a side note, but while we're here, I just want to hit that. That was very clear, because if Ross really cared about Tandy, her children wouldn't have been a burden for her doing basic things. She wasn't going over the top, but I mean, he just didn't even care. It was 100% about his needs. He wanted Tandy when he wanted Tandy. He wanted to go to the beach. He wanted her to do his surf thing, whatever. And you know, he cares about these minor children in her home. And that alone should have been a red flag to her. Like, this is not the relationship. It is better to be alone than bring someone into your family who knows you have a family, but is not willing to go into the sacrificial part of being a parent. If you are dating somebody and you don't have kids and you're getting ready to marry them, even if the kids live with the other spouse or the other parent, you are going in and taking on a role as a parent. And let me tell you, if you never had kids, parenting is a position of sacrifice.
Yes, it is.
How often do we get to do what we want to do? And if you can't take on that child, financially there's sacrifices, there are things that you have to do. And if you can't do that for emotional, absolutely. And if you can't do that, do not date somebody with the children saying, well, I should be first and the kid should be second. You're still married to a parent.
Right. Yeah.
And a parent is going to have to parent, even grown kids. You're going to have moments where you're having to release your spouse to parent that child. And if you struggle with that and you don't want to share that attention, because that's really what it is, then don't put the burden on a family pretending something just so you can get the parent.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to me as you were talking, what kind of came up for me was growing up. I know there were moments where as a preacher's kid, there were things that, I had to make a decision that my dad did his best to be there for everything that he possibly could. But there were times I wouldn't tell them I had something going on because I didn't want to put him in a position. I knew that this particular speaking engagement, this is a big deal, I'm thinking, as a child would think about those things. So there are times I wouldn't bring things up. But there was a point as a teenager that I made a decision that I'm ceding my dad to the world, that this is a seed that I'm sowing. So maybe everything doesn't look the way that my friend's dad, it might not look exactly the same, or it might not look the way that in my little romanticized child and teenage mind things should look. But this is a seed that I'm planting. And that is how I looked at it. I think we even talked about that somewhat growing up, at different times where corners got a little difficult. When you're marrying someone or you're married to someone who has a child, there's an element of priorities can shift at the drop of a dime.
Yes.
And that's just what it is. And you're seeding something that although you're giving of maybe your priorities, your time has to shift or yours is affected because of it. There's a seed that goes into the ground. And if you do that thing right, those kids can end up being a blessing to you. But it really depends on, like you're saying, it's a decision you have to make. And you won't fully know what you're going into if you don't have kids. You don't fully know what you're getting into. If you've never been married to somebody with kids and you don't have children, you don't know what you're getting into, then you need to really heed that. And the fact that Ross, to me, when they had to leave surfing at the beach, because this was the moment I was absolutely done with him. So there's a crab boil. They're leaving the crab boil because she doesn't know where the kids are. She can't reach them. Yep. She's trying to contact the boyfriend, Zoe's boyfriend. She can't figure out what's going on. And this dude is moping when they get there. The lights are out. It's dark. He's like, oh, it's no big deal. They probably just went with, Zoe's boyfriend and, it's not a problem. And her son comes scrambling across the church parking lot. Right. And he's clearly a little shaken up, by how they describe him. It's like, see, he's fine. And, Zoe, she's just with her boyfriend. And he's complaining that JT ended up at the church. He ended up getting a meal at the church because he had nowhere to go. He was scared to go in the cottage. And he's complaining that this little boy got to eat dinner and he didn't get to eat dinner. He had to leave the beach and didn't get to have a crab boil because her children were missing. I said, if you don't kick him to the curb right now, I'm about to close this book.
But it's awesome how she grew as the book went on.
Right.
And if you remember this one instance later on in the book where she was working at the seashell shop. I don't know. Yep, Sandy's place. And her daughter had just, broke up with her boyfriend. She was struggling going back to school. Yeah. So now the boy, Ross, calls, I need this so-and-so. I don't even know what he needed. And he wanted her to stop everything she was doing and go and give what she needed. She's like, no, we got this inspection coming. I'm trying to get Sandy's spot. Well, they'll be all right. They could do without you. And she was like, well, no, Zoe's here. And, she's, I really need to be close to her. Well, she'll be fine. And this is another. And she was like, no, Rob. And he was like, well, what am I supposed to? I need the things, and it was totally jacked up, but I appreciate it. And it was as she was learning and almost getting infused with the same strength she read about in those prayers that Iola had. Thank you. That she was able to stand up and say, no. But it was, I'm looking back at it, and we were going to talk about whether or not we were going to say how we thought this book was. off rip, beginning it was really slow.
It was very seasoned.
But as I got to the end, and I we're gonna get to that. It was a wonderful ending. And to then look back at it, I got a lot out of it. You get what I mean? Because it was really cool.
The ending helped the beginning.
Yes. And I'm gonna jump because I'm jumping anyway. But even when she first started reading her prayers, she didn't even know. She thought she was addressing her like biological father,
Right.
like father.
Exactly.
This is that and the other. And to see through those prayers, realize this, she's talking to
God, yeah.
to God, and all of that. I just thought it was beautiful how that all happened.
And actually, I think that the book is a great parody to life from the standpoint of how it was reading it, because the first probably half of the book, I was only still reading it because I knew we had this coming.
Yep.
And I had committed to doing it.
Yeah.
But then by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, it had touched me in so many places.
Yeah.
And I was so happy that I read it. And the parody in that is sometimes, especially when you're on your path to discovery or developing your gifts and talents or just walking into the calling God has for you, there always seems to be that season that you're like, why am I here?
Yep.
If I wasn't committed to Jesus, I would, maybe some of your relationships are like that.
Yeah.
This isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yep.
But just to sticking to it. And then on the back end, looking back and saying, you know what? God never wastes a season. And I think that's how the parody of this book too, it was that same kind of emotional feel that sometimes I can feel like. Just
So good. I like that about Tandy, because she got her confidence at the end. You saw her at the beginning like, come on, girl.
Yeah.
But at the end, she was very calm, especially at that towns meeting and all that. Just that. I'm probably jumping, but
they'll use it because I was about to go off on her sister.
it's that fear of, well, what am I going to say? And for her to pull from those prayers and just pull for, like, I can do this. And just that level of confidence, you wouldn't have seen that at the beginning,
Right. But let's talk about Iola's life.
Okay.
Because first of all, I didn't expect all these different subjects, especially what the sister did at the end, to be in the prayer box.
Yeah.
So what? Okay, so I got a little confused because anyway, I did. I was like, what? When they said that Isabella was that was what he was
going on.
and I was like, what? How did she end up being her niece? Okay, so
That got me for a minute. I had to think.
thank you. I thought she was gonna leave me. Okay, so Isabella, they grew up together in the house, right?
Right.
So we find this Isabella is like her sister. They just consider each other sisters.
Yes.
They're raised together. At some point, Iola gets sent to this place, this school, right? Iola doesn't understand why until she figures out she black. She like half black. And that's
black.
Well,
And this was during a time that was a massive deal because this family was a Benoit family.
Yep.
They were a very well-to-do family with lots of assets and all that kind of stuff. So Iola certainly didn't fit that.
nope. She was half black. And she still didn't, in the beginning of the prayers, didn't really understand, but she would pray, Lord, help me. You know, this is that. I even highlighted this one part. If I'm going to keep flipping, I'm going to stop because I flipped 50 times the last time and couldn't find what I was looking for. But in this one prayer, she said to the Lord, she was like, Lord, only let me answer to the name you gave me. This is after she found out that the sisters were talking and saying these terms, that one of the sisters was like, that's not a good term. And that's how she found out she was actually different, right? But she was like, Lord, let me only respond to the name you gave me, which was beloved. And I was like, oh, yeah. But so she ends up finding out, that she's half white and black. And then from there, somebody pick it up.
Because you still haven't sorted out how that's her niece.
Yeah, because then she ends up coming back. I probably should have started this straight up.
There it is.
She comes back, and then Isabella goes, right? And she gets married. They're in Pearl Harbor. That was sad what happened to Isabella. They're in Pearl Harbor, blew up, and it was tragic. Didn't know if she was alive. She wound up getting sick. One of the kids wound up dying. And she ends up, Isabella wants her to come down. I'm gone now. I think I'm mixing stuff up. Throw me a
bone.
Yeah, throw me something. Help me out.
I don't know that I can help you because you done confused me.
I confused you? Okay. So bottom line is, at the end of this, we figure out that Benoit, the grandfather,
Okay.
right, had a son who obviously got it on with Iola's mama, and that's how she wound up coming about. So Isabella, who grew up as her sister, was actually her aunt. Yes.
Because what happened?
Yes, okay.
Everybody read the book.
No, read the book.
Absolutely.
Because
No, you're right.
Because at the end, so Tandy, correct me, I just make sure. Tandy ended up finding out that she was the she's the one that had the mulberry stains and stuff on her feet in the.
Right, but we were going to talk about that.
We're not talking about that. Yeah, right yet.
Yes. We ain't ready for that.
So generationally, this was a thing that happened, right? Like it doesn't really happen in our time because people are not ashamed that they're not married and having children.
Correct.
Okay.
They think it's
So
okay.
It was a double
It's normal.
She was mixed and she was out of wedlock.
Right.
So then let's get to the point. Let me just skip and we can go back if we feel like it. But the grandfather actually ends up because Isabella passed away. And then Iola took care of the grandfather until he passed, and he left the house to her.
Right.
But none of this was public information.
No.
So Iola, we find out in her letters that even as she got older, that the time she was an outcast.
Yes.
Yeah, because
She didn't even like her. She
liked her.
I was upset with that.
She because there were all these rumors.
Yes.
And because she was half black, they're like she couldn't be a Benoit.
Yep.
Because
How she ended up with the house.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so as a result of that, she was that outcast and people were talking about her. And even Tandy was finding out some of those opinions and stuff from other people.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think what was really, really interesting about that, and I guess this is kind of maybe not the end of the story, but there had been throughout those years massive financial gifts given to help rebuild things in the town, take care of families. And it's Tandy, as she's reading these prayer boxes and she's finding out these prayers to the Lord, that the Iola's response to all of that was to give and give massive financial gifts to people in the community and take care of the very community that was dogging her out. And she did it without credit.
Yeah.
And she died peacefully without credit, which meant that, and I think this is always good because motive is so important.
Yes, it is.
And the applause of men is so flighty, but the applause of God is the only one that rings eternally. And she was clearly living by that. And I thought that was a beautiful thing as well. And I think to someone in Tandy's situation who seemed to be very affected by what other people thought, didn't seem to have her own security, which is how she ended up with the Trammell and why she stayed with Ross. Because if you read the book, Ross sets off so many signs that he needs to be kicked to the curb.
Yeah.
And even Tandy, she's recognizing these things, but yet she still was unable to let him go until a heightened moment that kind of forced it, even after she had started to grow. And I think so for a woman in that particular situation to see how Iola handled that was also really impactful for her.
Yeah. I want to read this one passage on page 331. This was a big one, big book. It said she'd helped new businesses like Sandy's. This is Tandy's spot, often making purchases from local shops and then donating the items to charity auctions and nonprofit programs. She'd aided families in need, sent anonymous donations to pay for cancer treatments, bone marrow drives, a motorized wheelchair for a woman who lost her legs in an accident on the docks. As her cash resources slowly dwindled, she began using items of value in the house to continue to do the work she felt compelled to do. There had been other Tiffany lamps before the Magnolia left the blue room, lamps and paintings and statues and jewelry, symbols of opulence slowly given away. And I thought to myself, this is how we should live. All these resources she had because it was given to her. She didn't just leave them there for her to enjoy and for her to, oh, I'm just going to take this all. She searched out ways to help people. And even though it looked like her value diminished, she was actually increasing that of other people. And by the time she died, you may think she died in this broke down house, and all of this, but she died having given away absolutely everything that she could probably have valued in her life. And I think that was so beautiful when I read that. I was like, they just slowly, but it was a beautiful thing. You know, you would think, oh, I must resource, but it was deliberate. It was purposeful. And it was just beautiful how she ended up giving like that.
Yeah, she even left the gift of getting to be a giver, I feel like, to Tandy's. So earlier on in the book, when Tandy started cleaning up the house, I think it might have been the first or second day that she was cleaning the house, she found an envelope, I think, on the kitchen counter
Recipe?
with the cash in it.
The cash.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So Tandy took it upon herself to go to the store and to find the individual. Somehow she knew who that person was, or she knew how to find them. I can't remember because I don't remember the name. But it gave her the experience. She was able to slide the money, I think, into his vehicle or something like that, and then tried to watch to see, you know, she's like imagining when he gets it. So it even left the experience behind of like, I feel like that ignited something for Tandy, like who had been so focused on at the time, how are we going to get out of this? You know, like, what if they're going to evict me? Like, her focus had really just been on, understandably so. She did. It helped how she felt. She was out there talking to Paul Chastain after sliding that in there. You know, like, it was like a glimpse of like, I actually do bring something to the table, a glimpse of her value. And I think that was even a beautiful gift. Like, along with what you said, it's in the same vein that Iola was doing these things and being a blessing and doing what the Bible says, bless those who curse you. You know, I'm sure some of the people that were blessed were some of the same people that had something to say. And if they really knew that this is the person who had funded that, they would have said something differently. But clearly at some point along Iola's journey, she had come to recognize that she was, like she said, only who the Father said she is. And she was resting and living in that to the point that it didn't matter if anybody knew the good that she was doing for them in the town.
Yeah, they found out she gave help these kids save these dolphins or something like that. And this was one of her prayers. Father, help these young people to see. Help them to show the world that our greatness is not in things we do for ourselves, but in the things we do for others. And power that channels itself into kindness and a hand outstretched in love. Be with these determined students. Help them to believe when naysayers come that you make all things possible. Oh my gosh, you know, and the prayer that she had for them, and she's helping them to help, you know, others. And it was just awesome. But I thought you were talking about the recipe for that one treat.
Oh,
remember that? It was some kind of treat she made, and she wound up,
I remember,
finding the recipe, and she wound up baking it. And I think the mail guy or something.
UPS guy or something.
Yes. And turns out she would always make those leave for him. And just in that too, she got that sense of doing for others. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's key too. We have to remember that we can get so consumed because she was dealing with a lot, right?
Yeah.
She was slowly trying to rehab herself off of this drug. She was trying to get with her kids and make things happen for them. But as she began to think about other people and do the things that Iola was doing, I think her eyes started opening, and it was beautiful to see that.
Yeah, it made her look, it changed her vision. And I think this is something that we probably could benefit doing regularly. It's just so easy to just look at what I don't have, what I need, what's not here, what so-and-so did, that whole kind of thing. And I think for Tandy, things started to turn around for her, when through Iola's example, she stopped looking at just, well, how are we going to do this and blah, blah, blah. Because she had a very rough relationship with her kids because during her addiction in her previous time, she had neglected them. And her teenage daughter was really the responsible one and had to step into the role of being the mother.
Yep.
To JT.
To JT.
JP.
Okay. So she had all that. But when she started taking her eyes off of that and seeing how Iola was able to do that.
Yeah.
And then also, I think Iola really did this as well and I think this is really when you started seeing, particularly with Tandy, things started going on, is that no matter how bad things are, there is something in your hands. And, you know, for Tandy, it was her skill set, which her father had taught her. Well, like general contracting, different things that she had this skill all along, but she was destitute for so long. And in grand fashion, she was able to really start to create her place in the town, to pick up friendships and relationships, to be able to help someone and the town, and to be able to make a living for herself using that one skill that she picked up in that season when she was working with her father.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great too. And it's particularly if you're in one of those seasons where you're like, survival. And survival seasons are tough, but probably one of the toughest things to do is just not to go completely into victim mentality.
Yep.
Where you just shrivel up and die. Seek out work. You know what I mean? There's something there.
Yep.
And one of the greatest things you can always do is sow that seed. And there will be people there.
Yeah.
That'll be because the ladies, Sandy, who she ended up fixing her store. This is where Tandy starts fixing her store and saving the property and all that stuff. Tandy was able to speak into her daughter's life that she was having trouble with and brought a stability to her teenage daughter. It was just like, I call those like the octopus blessings of God. I always kind of say that's the octopus because, octopus has 8 arms. And sometimes when God is blessing you with something, you see that one arm that affects you. But what you don't know is there's 7 other arms that are touching other people, filling other needs for other people that you don't see. And I felt like that was that moment because I also think Sandy got like kind of validation, being able to help the teenage daughter and just kind of all that.
I think it was Iola called it the flow of grace, the water of what was it? It was some, but it started
The grace water. She called it grape water. Yeah.
And like you said, there's something in your hands, and it may not even be skill. It was still that $50, and it was that box with all of those trinket things that she wanted to return. That's how she ended up at Sandy's place. She found it at Iola's house and was like, "Okay, this is really valuable. It's not going to go. It doesn't look like she paid for it. Let me go give it back to the store." And that's why she wound up going back to that store to give it to Sandy. Sparked up the conversation, saw the drywall, and was like, "I can be."
I didn't do water damage.
Yep. And then that's when she got the sisterhood that had her back. You know what I'm saying? And the end, because it wasn't just Sandy, it was other people, with her that really came together. So that flow, and how it moved. And remember too, going back about that $50, you brought it up. That's how she met Paul, my boy. My boy. Now, Paul is like the guy. He was the one. And later on, they end up, getting together. But it took a long time because she was still with Ross for a lot of that time. I'm sorry.
Ross.
She was still with him, right? So actually, if you guys recall, when she saw Paul, she lit up. He was cool. He was odd. He was different, but he was kind and stuff. And here comes Ross. And at first she thought that he was just being protective but all of it was so wrong. It was wrong. You get me? And Paul was just as chill. I'm sorry, that's my boy, right?
And I love Paul's confidence.
Yes.
Because he didn't get drug into the fight that Ross was trying to have with him. The comments Ross was repeatedly having around him. I thought that was another great lesson too, because sometimes you can be busy and worn out fighting battles that you're never supposed to fight.
That's
People are
why
gonna be
I
ignorant.
didn't
You don't
fight
have to
either.
join it.
Right.
Like, just keep moving.
okay.
Just keep
And I feel like Paul knew what he was doing. He was like, oh, okay, he could see, and he was like, I'm just gonna stay in position because I know when this door opened, this is my woman.
And it opened. I'm sorry. And he was right there.
He was definitely a man. Yes.
We only got 26
We're already there.
minutes, so we might.
We're already there.
Let's go ahead and go.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
So wait, let's introduce Gina. So Gina, so first of all, what's her name? Tandy had a rough child. Their parents was trifling.
Yeah.
They
They were struggling. Think, yeah.
I'm sorry. I feel like I introduced the word trifling, and that's just spinning in the air right now. Baron, go ahead.
Okay.
Where I got from.
It's okay.
So they struggled, and she would often get dropped off with her grandfather, who lived in, an area where he would go and help people repair from storms. So anyway, so she had a sister named Gina. Oh, Gina. Now, Gina was, she was really out there, blah, blah, blah. She got she got reintroduced in the story when Zoe looked like she was trying to run away.
Right. And she had been emailing her aunt, whose motives were wrong from the get.
From the get.
Yeah.
So then while Zoe broke up with her boyfriend, devastating because now nobody wants to talk to her at school. So she reaches out. Now she want to go back home to Texas, reaches out to her aunt. Aunt says, yeah, you can come live with me. Zoe tried to leave, but it was Pauline that found Zoe on the road, sick, brought her back, right? Tandy finds out she was talking to Gina and like, hey, how's this, happening? Wanting to leave Gina out of it. Gina shows up
At the house, pretender.
at Sandy's,
Pretended.
at the house. Is it the house of Sandy? It doesn't matter, but she showed up.
Oh, no, we did. Sandy store. Yeah, you're right.
Sandy's store. And it was, so she tried to suck her back in to this old way of doing. Not just here to, and let's go to a party. Let's go hang out. This place, like a whole bunch of guys, and this is that and the other, and she was just wrong. And then it ended up, here comes Zoe's birthday. And, you can really see Tandy's growth, right? They're at the place. She's doing a party for Zoe.
Yeah, so Sandy and all of them
Yep.
had, by this point, Zoe's getting ready to have this big celebration. The town is there, all that stuff. Where Zoe and her sister Gina knew about this, right?
Gina knew.
She knew about the party. And instead, what she did was she took that chick's child
Out of school.
without telling her mother and took her out of the state
Yes.
to quote unquote celebrate.
And didn't tell her.
They didn't tell her. So she not only does the daughter not show up for the party, but Tandy doesn't know where she is.
Nope.
So there's the whole panic of all of it.
Yeah.
And it turns out Gina has got this chip on her shoulder. I guess maybe because of her life.
Yeah.
She has her own issues, and she feels like anybody who has anything, it's for her to take.
Yep.
And that's how she's approaching her sister. And now her sister's coming into a life, and she has a relationship, and she has friends. And so now now Gina is in, and she's sneak attacking, and she's just trying to cut her sister down anywhere she can. I don't think I felt like reading the story of Gina, not that she woke up again with her broomstick, like I'm about to wreak some havoc. I feel like life had made her that way, and she had not done any intervention to stop that.
Yeah.
Because life can make you crazy.
Yeah.
100%.
Iola could have crazy.
Right. Iola could have had it.
Yeah. Stark.
Right. Your story does not excuse your lack of redemption, because redemption is available, but it does take work.
Yes, it does.
You have to make decisions to stop and turn some things around. But I also thought, because I know y'all want to bust up what Gina did, but I also thought what was interesting about it too was this notion. I think this is so important, especially for the women that might be watching us. And we're detailing a lot of the story, as opposed, which is taking up a lot of our time. For those of you who may not have read it, but for those of you who have read it, I'm just going to kind of go into this. And that is, the people that you allow in your circle are so important.
Yeah.
Just because they have the same blood running through their veins does not mean that that's the people that are supposed to be walking with you in that season of life. Yeah. And that's so, so important. And you see Tandy have that kind of reserve when Gina shows up. Yeah. And instead of really putting her foot down, which we saw was a problem for Tandy, was really she'd have these feelings, but it took a lot for her to stand up for herself. She didn't actually stand up for herself until the very end.
Yes.
And this is after she's discovered who Iola is, and now Iola's property has been dilapidated.
Yep.
And you've got what is happening a lot today. You've got some real estate investors coming in and want to tear down and create this other item. So now here Tandy's feeling like, well, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to save this property. I can fix this property. We can restore it. And this is a Benoit house, and she's going to tell this history and this story. So I think, again, just to kind of say that is that you have to learn to say no. And sometimes people will make you feel guilty about saying no.
Yeah.
But when you say yes to everything, you are saying no to something.
That's right.
You're saying no to your peace of mind. You're saying no to parts of your future. You're saying no to all of these other sorts of things that are meant to be yours, but learning to stand up and, again, not allow yourself to need the affirmations of people.
Yeah.
When you get your confirmation from God.
Yeah.
You don't need affirmations from people. And I think that's something that, especially as women, that can be very difficult. And it means that you just have to be intentional. And this is really where your daily devotion comes in, and making sure what you put in, that you're constantly putting in the word of God. You're working against those tendencies to be dependent on someone else to make you feel any kind of way. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think Tandy would have saved herself a lot of heartache and trouble had she learned that lesson sooner. I'm glad she learned it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was one thing I was thinking along the lines of that so many of us can relate to these stories. Maybe not the same situation, but the same spirit rolling through that.
Yeah, very much so.
Sandy said something earlier on, or not earlier on, but throughout the process of the book that's referenced. And she kind of, I want to bring that up for a minute because I feel like there's this in culture now, there's a lot of stories, even in the news, about people cutting off their families, like their parents, and they're, just shutting and slamming doors. And I kind of want to talk about that for a minute because I know it's an issue and it's been going on. Yeah. But Sandy laid out that the family we find can be as powerful as the one we're born with.
Yes.
And I definitely think that there's some real truth to that they're going to be, none of us will ever be 100% happy with any relationship that we have. Mm-hmm. Because whatever expectations or dreams or visions or ideas that we have for how something should be, no one else can ever fully know and understand all of those. You don't have time to even communicate them all. Mm-hmm. So you have to take this approach that, like, what do I bring to the table? What do they bring to the table? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you wish that you had this close relationship with, your mom or your dad or, a sibling, that you just wish it was that way and it's not. Yeah. And should we, rather than brooding on that and focusing on that as a victim and staying in that place, just finding where can we connect? Mm-hmm. What can we talk about? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Where is this person? Can I have this person in my life? There are times where you have to shut the door to somebody. They become so destructive that they wreak havoc in their wake. And especially, for me, I related to Tandy in that sometimes it's hard for me to stand up for myself in certain instances. But when it comes to, my siblings, my kids, you know what I mean? And it's somebody, I'm coming out of my personality. Whoa, hold on a second. Yeah. You shouldn't be saying that. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't, you know what I mean? It's a little bit easier for me. But we have to make that determination, and you got to do it prayerfully. Yeah. You can't just make a decision in an emotional moment. Somebody hurts you and now I'm done with you forever, mom, because this, or dad, because that. You can't do that. You got to actually, if you're submitted to Christ, you got to take it before the Lord. You got to try to address the issue, go to the person and try to address it. But after a period of time, if you recognize this is going to continue to happen and you're going to put my kids in a situation that's dangerous, or you're going to constantly berate me and talk down to me or jump at me like you're going to hit me, you got to make a determination for your life and just close that door. And there is a place and a space for that. Yeah. And I think people need to kind of understand the difference. Toxic does not mean you bother me and I have to learn to walk in love with you. That's not toxic.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not a reason to cut someone off. Right. You really don't know whether or not you exhibit the fruit of the spirit and if you're in isolation.
Not at all.
Because there's nobody that you have to flow with and be gentle with and be long-suffering with and walk in love. You have no idea. So if you don't have any friends, if you don't have close relationships with anybody, you don't really know what maturity level you're at. Yeah. How do I know that? Having kids. My husband and I we have major similarities in how we were brought up. Like, we didn't have no real major issues. We had things we had to deal with and talk about. Mm-hmm. Like normal people, but it was ease. And then when kids get in the picture, it was like, whoa. Am I yelling? Right. Mm-hmm. That was for me, that was where I learned it. Oh, yeah. But we kind of need to differentiate between those two. Just because you don't like somebody, or just because somebody can ruffle your feathers here and there, or they're not your favorite personality, or they're too loud for you, or, they don't speak up enough, or whatever, is not a reason to cut somebody off and to close the door to the relationship.
It's an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, you want to be careful the type of seed that you sow, because all of us have scars and issues, and the Lord is working on every single person. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people respond based off of the story they tell themselves, including you. Yeah. Yes. And so sometimes it's not that everybody around you is toxic. It's that you have some toxicity, or you forecast that, you assume that. And some of that comes about in working relationships. So I think that's really very important. And I think the sister, what's her name? Gina is a perfect example of that. Yeah. Tandy allowed her back into her house, allowed her in her space, and she has the niece that loves her.
Sisterhood. She did what they had when they were
sabotaged it. Yeah. How does she do that? Go ahead.
No. Well, wait, because I got to bring up this one point, and then everything go. Yeah. So I really want to make a point of the restoration between mother and daughter.
Yeah.
And the moment that Gina did bring Zoe back home, of course, in platform shoes and mini skirt and stuff. Anyway, so she went up, got washed up while she went off on Gina. When he come back, they enjoyed the cake and the ice cream. Just
in this party.
And at first she cried. What's her name? Zoe was crying because she saw the birthday cake. This is the first time she's realizing I missed a party, right? So then she's crying. She says, "Mom, I'm sorry." And then Tandy goes over and hugs her, and they swayed. And it reads like, and they breathed in, something. What is the relationship between a mother and a daughter? And I was like, oh, because it was tough in the beginning between Zoe and Tandy. You know what I'm saying? It really was. And she struggled even when Tandy began to become more of a mom. Zoe almost resented that because I've been a mom this whole time where you've been absent. You get what I'm saying? But then when she needed her mom was there. And then it really ended up in this beautiful moment.
But she didn't blow up on her.
No.
But nothing. I think if Tandy had come down on her and was going off, it would have been a completely different story.
Yeah, it would have.
I'm not to, so just play a little advocate here, not to be on Gina's side per se, but in that moment, the relationship that Tandy had with her daughter.
Yeah.
I just wonder, was Gina like, I wish I had,
I'm sure.
Is there a moment of,
I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm projecting all these things and I'm being a butt because I really want that. Yeah. I wish my life had turned out like this, or, we grew up the same way, or, we had the same opportunities, or maybe not the same, whatever. But it's like you made certain decisions and you're here now. You're flourishing. You got a nice relationship. You're doing things in the community. You have this confidence that I knew you before.
Yeah. Right.
And I wish I had that. So, that's my side of it now. Again, Gina was.
No, yeah, I think Gina was a victim in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah.
But it had allowed her to, anybody else doing well, she felt like she needed to. She felt it challenged her. I think anything good that Tandy had challenged Gina, she had to either prove it, that she was better, or she had to try and take it.
Yeah.
Which is why two things.
I'm sorry.
So you get to this place where there's going to be this huge town meeting where Tandy is going to have to speak publicly, which is not her thing.
Nope.
She's going to have to speak publicly to present why this Benoit house should be saved.
Yep.
And she's going to also have to present who Iola was.
Yep.
And that she was the rightful owner of this house.
And
And all the things
she did. Right. And all the things she did. So they had made all these boards and just this full presentation.
was helping.
Because the only thing she could really do is appeal from that standpoint and just let people know this is historical and all this kind of stuff. And so everybody who knows her knows that she's in this position where she's coming straight out of her element. I mean, who would want? Because by this time, Tandy's like, this is why I found these blocks. I'm supposed to save this house. This is where I'm at in this story.
Yes,
She found purpose. And she also found out that she was telling a story. Iola was telling a story about when she was a child and she was with her father.
Yeah.
And help me with it.
That part I did.
Out about that until
Until the very end. Okay, cool. Okay, well, then I'll leave that.
But you never mentioned Paul and how he held that woman.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, he spoke
He
life
did.
into her
He
to
did.
tell her she could do it. And so finally she gets up
Yep.
and she's in front of this town hall. She's only got 3 minutes to give this presentation, to give this speech. And there's a person in the audience who is heckling her and publicly that had to be shut down by the city.
Listen, who was it?
Who was it?
Her own flesh and blood.
Listen.
Gina.
Man.
Came up in here. Yeah, just Gina. Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just to this place where you are the adversary.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tandy got through it, but Tandy had to really stay on purpose real quick.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're really at this moment of destiny, you're going to have to do that. Because you might be getting shocked at who decided to become your adversary.
Yep.
You could go in this whole thing. How could you? And y'all start fighting and you miss the moment.
You missed the moment.
So I thought that was a big thing too, is that Tandy had to she get
Focus.
because the devil don't deserve your attention every time they try and show up.
That's
He
right.
don't.
It doesn't. No, and she went straight on through that and was
did.
able to
She even said, like, you know, she was like, I was, in the sense, like, outside of my, like, I heard, it's like I was watching myself talk.
yes,
And she pulled that string from the
Yep.
And Gina was also not only interrupting her, she was introducing an idea
Yes.
that Tandy had been stealing from the woman and had been secretly doing all this stuff based off of assumptions. Like Gina didn't know what was going on. And again, another lesson. When you're not in it, keep your mouth off of it because you don't know. Because Gina did not know what it all was. And you could see even when she got to the town hall and saw the report, the stupidity she felt.
Yes.
Like, oh, I've put all these pieces together without fact. And again, as women, we can do that. Well, I know, I can sense it, I can do it, and you don't know.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know. So sometimes it's better to just not be in that seat.
I dealt with that this morning, just from an HR perspective, dealing with issues. Somebody's popping off. And I'm like, there's a whole set of things that have happened before your name ever even came up. This ain't got nothing to do with you. Just but you can tell people project all the way into based on their own insecurities or where they know they're already falling short. They know they're not holding up their end of the bargain.
You can't have,
And they project this entire like building
yeah.
out of something that really is this big. It's like,
Or not even an issue at all.
right. Like, I don't understand. What's your issue? What's the problem with what happened? And that's like, the older I get, the more I recognize like why the Bible says shutting your mouth is wisdom.
Yeah.
In many cases, like you just don't know. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And your response just has to be, might look this way to you, but pray.
Yeah.
Stay out of it because it really ain't got nothing to do with you. Gina, you ain't even this. Right. You don't. Where do you live? What's your address?
you just showed it.
Okay.
But that wasn't all Gina did.
No, it was. So they on the way home. Come on, Zoe in the car. What she see?
She'd have been walking.
Oh no,
I thought y'all wanted to bust that out. Go ahead.
I'll lead you up. So they in the car.
Oh, Lord.
Tandy and Zoe in the car.
Let's tell the story. Go ahead. Just tell the story.
They in his car here to the house. So when she pull up at the house, almost at the house, Tandy sees Ross's car and Gina's car at her house. So she immediately regrets bringing Zoe home. Says, Zoe, I need you to go to the church. Somebody said she knew it was all going to my house.
She about to be out of puppy.
She pulls up in her house, and guess who on the floor in the living room? Who is it?
Her
Ross
sister and her ex.
Gina. On the floor in the living room. Ross getting up, putting together his pants. What is it? Gina put in. This is not what you think. This is that other. So Ross tries.
They were in Iola's house.
I thought they were in it doesn't even matter.
They were in Iola's house.
Now she probably filed even greater offense at that.
Yeah, they were in Iola's house.
How dare. So then she says, Ross gave the ride at right, all this, that, and the other. Trying to Gina, started going off on Gina and all of this, telling them to get out. And guess who showed up? Told them suckers get out.
Paul
Paul
Chastity.
showed up.
Some Paul.
Paul showed up because Zoe came to the church, whatever, said this, that, and the other. Paul was like, I'm fine. To get in the mix of this, sound like something going down. Paul got in that house, told them to get out.
And because they tried to flip the script, they both tried to. They knew that Tandy's weakness was standing up for herself, and Ross and Gina tried to flip the script
Together.
And her man came. Well, he wasn't her man at the time. Ross was supposedly her man.
He is now, because them suckers was like, oh. But I was like, yeah, it was. But Paul showed up. But that's beautiful.
Yes.
You know, first of all, that she stood up for herself, right? And then that also was just sad that some people are just in a cycle of destruction that they do. Both was Ross and Gina, right? And then now we get to the end. They're reading again some more of these things because they have to now. They save
Clean
the
the
house,
house
but
down.
they clear out the house
Yes.
so it can be
Word
fully
plan. Yep, restored.
So they're still reading these stories, and she's reading, or Paul is reading a story, and she hears a story about the kid with the please touch
Mulberry berry.
Yeah, this kid with the mulberry stain, and it was a beautiful.
There was a mulberry stain on her
shoes.
shoes.
Yep. And she was mentioned a few times in Iola's prayers, but it never really triggered. So then
The girl with the mulberry shoe.
she would just occasionally say,
It was
Lord,
something
touch
Paul.
her.
It was something.
Touch this little girl. Yeah. She was praying for this little girl.
Yeah.
Right.
So then it triggered in Tandy's mind, something's up with this girl, this little girl.
Who is the mulberry girl?
This mulberry girl.
Yep.
So she's like, where is the, so she finds this box on the porch with some of the stuff that was about to be taken away. And she reads it and she figures out that, go ahead.
That she's reading it and she's reading the prayer again and she's reading more about this mulberry girl. And then she remembers she has a flashback. Yeah. She was the mulberry.
Yep. Her grandfather was at the house cleaning and straightening up and doing some repairs. And Iola asked, hey, what can I do? And he just said, keep my granddaughter in your prayers. And so Iola in one of the prayers, I don't know this girl's name, but you know her, Lord. She's the mulberry girl. And she would pray for the most. It was just this wonderful circle back around.
So the last thing, you are the white berry that removes the stain. Be with her as you have been with me. Your loving daughter, Iola.
Good job.
I know, right?
That's beautiful.
It's great.
Yeah. Like what?
It just
So it does, which is what happens with God.
Yeah.
Because all of the things that had happened in Iola's life up to this point, all of the things that had happened in Tandy's life and were going to happen in Tandy's life, they crossed paths.
Yeah.
And this woman is praying for this girl. And it is not coincidence that this same, this is probably why I think the book did so well. This book, because though this is not a actual factual story, this is an actual novel. It is so indicative of the way God functions.
Yeah.
You never know what contact you have today or tomorrow, or someone who's praying for you. Because the funny thing is, Iola never got to see the fruit of that prayer.
Right.
But she didn't need to see it.
Right.
Because by that time, her life, she had learned and seen how God will take things and fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the shiny thing that comes through, because I even think the removal of Ross, I think this was a big moment for Gina to, obviously she's removed out of the picture too, but it's an opportunity for Gina to also confront her own thing when she gets in the dark and why did I do this? And then she sees who Ross is, who she threw away her family to get. And we already know Ross is, in our favorite word today, trifling. So I think I thought that was what was so beautiful about the book. And it made the history that felt slow at the beginning of the book for me make that slow part at the beginning make sense, because you're not going to have that full moment at the end unless you understand the beginning. And so for that person that's struggling, I want to say there's so many things in your life you may not appreciate, you don't understand, you have questions, why am I doing this? Why does someone else seem like they're getting away with it over here and what have you? I just want to say, stay till the end. And because when you look back on what God has brought you through and the things that don't make sense, you'll see the strain through your life of the hand of God that's leading and guiding you and putting people in your path. And sometimes the question to ask in a season is not, what am I getting from this? The question is to ask, what is God putting in me as I walk through this season? Because he will take even the things that were meant to destroy you and make you better with it. Right. And I just think that's just the beauty of no matter what season you're in, how you're feeling, there's safety in the arms of God.
Yeah.
And there's safety in just being a giver, period, and finding something that you can give. I think really for me, that's what spoke to me. Whatever season you're in, there's something you can do for somebody else. Whatever season you're in, there's something outside of yourself that you can focus on and pay attention to and trust that God will give you what you need, right? But we are always supposed to be something where God can flow in and through, and if it stops and we're holding it up, I think we need to address it. And even in reading this and talking now, I think we all sort of need to locate ourselves. Are we a part of that sisterhood? You know what I'm saying? Are we, Tandy, are we growing and still feeling our way? Are we Gina and we need to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves? You know what I'm saying? Who are we? And then figure out and know that God can take us from wherever we are to someplace absolutely beautiful. So in hindsight, after saying, I struggled getting through the front, but this,
it was a good book. It was good.
It was a great book. Once you got to that end and it reflected back and you saw the change in Tandy's life, I really enjoyed it after, and even this talk sort of brought out a whole bunch that I didn't even know I got out the book that I did.
Yeah.
So it was great. Ooh, the prayer
books. Yeah. So you may think, well, you guys told the whole story. Why would I read it? But I would recommend
Yes.
you read it.
Because we skipped a whole bunch too. And there's no way you can cover 350 pages. More than that. Yeah.
But
And there's so many little things. And that's what, and we've talked about this before, how God can speak to us, not just in the book straight breaking down a chapter of the Bible, but also in the book that tells a story, and the gifts and talents of people to bring in and still speak to us through it. So I would still encourage you to read it. Give the book to somebody else. If you have it, let them read it as well. I'm excited about our next book though. Wow. Pastor Deborah's book. Wisdom from above for the godly woman. And Pastor Deborah don't mince words, whatever. She says it exactly
How I like it is.
yeah.
and she's going to be clear. And I can't wait to get into this book. We are going to post on our website, godsbeauties.com, exactly when we'll start reading and when our discussion is going to be. You can get this book at our bookstore here at Word of Faith in the Merck Lobby, or you can get it on the e-store. Just go to wordoffaith.cc and grab the book, and we'll let you know when we're going to start reading. And then we'll have a wonderful discussion about it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so much fun. We got some other things coming up for our women's ministry. So don't forget to go to godsbeauties.com to look for those things as well. We got a prayer breakfast coming up. The registration for that opens on June 22nd and the actual prayer breakfast on July 26th. I'm looking forward to that. We got some great things for that for the women. And then our fun run, it may be the last one we do, but I want everybody to get involved. Walk it, run it. Just don't crawl it and have a great time. All right. So
Just don't crawl.
yeah, I was going to say crawl it, but I was like, if you got to crawl it, I'm going to want you to cheer.
Just come. Just come.
Come
cheer.
enjoy.
Be a part.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's it for the God's Beauties book club. Thank you, Ebony, Pastor Michelle, Minister Chris, for being with us. And you all have a great day.
Bye.